Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Odd and Untold. This is episode 10. And this week, I'm going to be a little honest with you guys. I've had a rough couple of weeks, and I wasn't sure if I was going to have the time or the energy to really do a podcast this week. So I didn't really have much planned. I was going to skip it, but I'm really trying to stay on schedule and get the podcasts done. So this week, I'm just going to do another one of my personal experiences. I mentioned it a few weeks ago when I interviewed Scott Perry for the first time, Black Triangle UFO over Brooklyn, and I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about that tonight. But before I get to the story, I wanted to just do a few more shout outs. I had to re-record my intro last week because I kept screwing up the name of Dax Woods Wanderer. I don't know why. I just had like a mental block with it last week. I've been following them since pretty much since I started the channel. Great people over there, Jay and Stephanie. And I just couldn't say the name. So I had to re-record it. And in the process of doing so, I forgot to mention one of my biggest followers and a good friend, Dan Nicotera. So Dan, I know you're watching. I know you watch every week. Thank you, my friend. Dan and I had met a few months ago when I went camping with my buddy Josh and Dustin Lamanna. And Dan and I did a lot of talking. We bonded a lot while Josh and Dustin did some fishing, and Dan brought these huge ribeye steaks that he cooked for us, and beggar's pie, and he was a great cook, great keeper of the fire, and talked a lot about his army days and his family, and so we really bonded. And I do appreciate, Dan, that you listen and you watch every week. I really do appreciate it, man. So sorry if we got you last week. Also wanted to give a shout out to From the Shadows podcast. They actually on Instagram, they retweeted or re-Instagrammed this shirt that I had Instagrammed a few weeks ago. It's this kind of psychedelic Bigfoot. So give them a listen. They got a good podcast over there as well. And lastly, I just wanted to show you guys, I've been drinking these polar seltzers, and this one, which you can't see because of my background, so I'll have to do that here, is Yeti Mischief. It's really good. It's kind of like a lemon lime, but that's what I'm drinking tonight. So green screen does not work too well. Okay, so on to my story. So again, this week I wanted to share a personal experience I had. This was back in 2004. I was living in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn at the time, and I'm going to actually I'm going to share my screen here because I have some Google Street View of where I was. So there we are. And so I grew up in Bay Ridge. Like I said, I lived in Bay Ridge. This was a couple of years after I married my first wife, and it was our anniversary. So I wanted to go and get her a piece of jewelry. And this is the intersection. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see this. This is the intersection of 86th Street and 5th Avenue in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. And if you're just listening to the podcast, you can find this easily on Google Maps. So I'm at this intersection, and what had happened was I had the day off, and I parked down here. Never find a parking spot on 86th Street. It's a huge like shopping strip. And so I parked right about here where this white SUV is in front of the Models. There's this parking garage here on the corner of 5th Avenue. And I'm just going to go back to the intersection because I can't really show the point of view from where I was parked. And this gives a much better point of view here. So I had gotten up early, said I'm going to go get my wife a piece of jewelry. Going to be the good husband. Got up early, drove down to 86th Street. I could have taken the train or walked. It was October. But I said, let me take the car today. So I took the car, found a sweet parking spot, parked the car, get out of the car. The jewelry store that I wanted to go to was further down 86th Street, closer to 4th Avenue. So walked down there and they were closed. It turned out that the reason I had the day off was it was a holiday, and they opened later that day. So instead of going back home, I decided to wait the hour. I think it was 2 hours, actually. I think I got there around 9. They didn't open until 11 that day. So I went back to my car and decided to wait. I had a sweet parking spot, and in Bay Ridge, a parking spot, even back then, was prime real estate. So you got a good parking spot, you stayed put. So went back to the car, said, let me listen to some tunes and wait for the shop to open, and then I can go in and buy my wife's present. So got back to my car, and again, the car is looking this way. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. On the left-hand side here, you can see Century 21, which is a huge department store. It's been there for many years, since I was a kid. There's one in Manhattan right by the World Trade Center area. Anyway, I'm in my car. I'm listening to music, probably Q104.3, classic rock. And I notice out of my vision, and I'm going to zoom in here, but there's this apartment building here. It's a kind of reddish brick building. It's a billboard on the side. So right above that, but it wasn't right above the building. It was just, that's where I saw it, but it looked to be further away. I see this black triangle. Not a perfect triangle. It was much wider on the bottom and kind of went to like a point on the top. So it could have been saucer shaped, but to me, it looked like a black triangle. Pure black, just hovering there. And, I thought to myself, that's weird. And I couldn't take a photo of it. At the time, the cell phones were, I think I probably had like a little Motorola flip phone or something like that, or a Razor. And they didn't really have cameras on them. If they did, it would not have captured this. And I don't even know if my phone had a camera. I was that sort of behind the times at the time. And I noticed this thing hovering there. And if you keep looking out, that kind of heads over to like Staten Island and Jersey City. So at first I just figured it was probably a plane or a helicopter. Staten Island has lots of traffic, so I figured there was probably just a helicopter hovering out there, and didn't think much of it. So as the morning went on, I'm still listening to, classic rock, and I'm watching this thing just hover there, and it's not moving, and I don't hear anything. Again, it looked very far away, so that didn't really concern me. I started getting concerned when, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth song came on. And, these songs at 2.5, 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes each, time is ticking by. So it's going, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And just watching this thing hover there. And it was really bizarre. It didn't move. And I, basically stayed still. And I'm trying to debunk this. And in this Google image, you can't really see too well, but back then there were some aerial antennas right on the top of the building. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can kind of see where my cursor is, and I'm kind of pointing to you right above where these aerial antennas were, and this UFO was in the sky. It was clearly not part of the building. It was in the sky, much further away than Bay Ridge. It didn't look like it was hovering over Bay Ridge, but maybe out over the water, maybe even out over Staten Island. Anyway, I started getting concerned because the time was ticking away and this thing was not moving. And I remember sitting very still in my car, not moving, trying to maintain that point of reference just to see if it moved, because even a helicopter hovering is going to move little bits here or there. And I remember for minutes, I just kind of sat as perfectly still as I could, watching this thing, making sure that it didn't sort of move left or right or up or down. And it was just sort of staying at the same height. And I had landmarks in my vision, and I was kind of monitoring, is it higher than this lamp post now, or did it move left or right of this aerial antenna? And it never did. So then I started looking at other shoppers on the street. There were, people walking up and down the street doing their morning shopping, and no one else had noticed it that I could tell. They weren't looking up in the sky. And again, it was small. It wasn't huge. It was noticeable, but it wasn't huge. It wasn't hovering right over us. And again, unless somebody was looking up specifically at it, and I was only doing it because I was in my car, bored out of my mind and just staring off into space, no one would have really seen it. I'm just going to close this window here so you guys get a better view. There you go. And it just struck me as odd that now it's like 20, 25 minutes, this thing is there and it's not moving. So I was bored. I still had plenty of time before the store opened. So I said, let me get out of the car and just walk closer to it, closer to 4th Avenue and 86th Street. And let me just subtly kind of look at people and see if I can notice them looking up into the sky, if they see anything, if anybody notices it. So I start walking, and again, I'm still seeing this thing in the sky. It's not moving. It wasn't a artifact on the windshield. It wasn't something that I was imagining. So I walk all the way up, just about to Fourth Avenue, just where I couldn't really see it anymore because the building obscured my view, and no one else had noticed it. And I was much younger at the time. I was a little more shy, and I didn't want to say, "Hey, does anybody see that, black triangle in the sky?" So I confirmed that I could see it. I confirmed that if I got out of the car, if I walked towards it, it was still there. And so I decided to go back to my car and see how much longer it took to leave. So I turned around, went back, and every couple of feet I would turn around and look and make sure it was still in the sky, and it was there. And got back to my car, got in my car, put the radio back on. I'm looking at the clock, the digital clock in the car. Now it's over a half hour at this point, probably 40 minutes. And I'm just sitting there watching this. And now as I'm watching it, this is where it gets a little weird. This triangle in the sky. And again, I resituated myself in the car so that I was kind of lined up with the aerials again and certain street light posts where I could kind of say, okay, this is not moving. This is where it was when I got out of the car. Had it kind of triangulated there, and I'm just watching it. And at this point, from the bottom, it drops what I can best describe as like sparkles. So these things kind of fall out of the bottom of it, and they're sparkling, and they just kind of fall straight down. It didn't look like a laser beam. It wasn't flares. I've seen flares in the sky on video. I've seen them in real life. It wasn't flares. It looked like sparkles. It just looked like, I guess maybe even chaff is the best way to describe it, which for those who don't know, chaff is like metallic substance that fighter planes can disperse to confuse missiles. And it just had this very silvery, sparkly look to it. It looked like sparkles. It was silverish, and they clearly were just like falling out of this thing. And that lasted for maybe a second. It doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're watching it and you're one Mississippi and it's just this stuff is coming out, second and a half maybe. And I just remember thinking that is really weird. Like, what the hell is that? And then the sparkle stopped, and this thing just kept hovering there, and it did not move. It was solid black. There was no lights, no rotors, no tail, nothing. Just this, kind of triangle shape, very wide on the bottom, and just went up to a point. And kept watching it, and watched it probably for another 10 minutes. It was just about under an hour that I'd watched this thing in the sky. Drops these sparkles, and literally in the blink of an eye, it was gone. And I know in a lot of UFO reports, people will say they saw it like zoom off or blast off, or they kind of see it streak away. It was literally, I blinked my eyes and it was gone. And I was like, holy shit, where did this thing go? I've been watching it for like 58 minutes, I believe, is how long I watched it for. And it was just gone. And I'm scanning the sky. I'm looking up, I'm looking down. Couldn't find it. I get out of the car and I'm walking around. I'm looking at, I'm looking down towards the water. I'm looking towards the bridge. I'm looking at the Verrazano Bridge. I'm looking at all these different places and could not find it. It was just gone. And it was just the weirdest thing. I didn't see it streak off. And again, I was just so laser focused on this, just watching it. And I didn't at the time think it was a UFO in the traditional sense, a alien spacecraft. I'm thinking it's unidentified. I don't know what it is. Is it military? We do have Fort Hamilton, the Army base, which is very close in Bay Ridge. It's right down by the water, and the base of the Verrazano Bridge. We do see military helicopters there from time to time, so it's not unusual to see military aircraft. We've had fighter planes go over. I've seen black helicopters, unmarked black helicopters, like some weird stuff, but conventional aircraft, stuff that you can identify. That's a plane, that's a helicopter. This, I don't know what it was. It didn't change shape. It didn't seem to move. It didn't seem to make any sort of noise. The sparkles that it dropped were very strange. I don't know what those were. And it just disappeared in the blink of an eye. It didn't move. It didn't fly off. I didn't see it streak. Maybe it did. I could have just been blinking at that moment. Back then, my eyesight was a lot better. My attention span was a lot better. And I was really into this stuff. And seeing something strange in the sky, I was focused on it. And in the blink of an eye, it was gone. Don't know what the sparkles were that it was dropping. Don't know what I saw. I don't know what this black craft was. I'm not saying it's alien. I'm not saying it's extraterrestrial or interdimensional. It could have been military. I don't know what it was. I don't know why it would be dropping sparkles. The only thing I know is that there are a lot of people who report black triangles as UFOs. They'll see something in the sky and they say it was a black triangle or a black boomerang shape. And again, in the early 80s, a lot of people could sort of say, oh, you saw a stealth fighter, you saw a stealth bomber. Not for an hour, not staying in the same spot. It wasn't a stealth fighter or bomber, nothing that we know about anyway. If the government has something that can now hover for an hour in one spot and not move, and then it's gone in the blink of an eye, very different. So again, I'm not saying it was an alien spaceship. Don't know what it was. I did go home that night. Actually, well, that day, once I purchased my wife's jewelry, I went home and went online just to kind of see if anybody else had seen anything, if they'd reported anything. I went to some UFO databases for days and maybe even weeks after, just checking every day to see if anybody reported anything in Brooklyn. And again, this is the early 2000s. It's still kind of early days for the internet, and the paranormal really hadn't exploded the way it has today to be this, phenomenon. So I really didn't get the answers I was looking for. I never really did. I kept looking, and again, I could have searched 17 different databases, and maybe the 18th one I checked would have had it. But I don't know. I don't know what I saw. It was very strange. It was just one of those things I can't really explain with conventional aircraft. It wasn't a trick of my eye. It wasn't something on the windshield. I saw it. It was there. No matter which angle I was at, I got out of the car. I walked a whole block down, more than an avenue down. It was there. And then it was gone. And it was dropping sparkly material from it. So I don't know what to make of that. So that's my personal story for the week. This is going to be a short episode. Again, I'm very tired. I'm emotionally drained. I'm physically drained. And next week, hope to be back with some guests. We had an awesome show last week. Josh and Scott were on for the Bigfoot Roundtable. Just want to thank those guys again. They came through in a pinch because, again, last week was a very bad week for me. And I gave them a couple hours notice, and they were like, yeah, no problem. We'll come on. And we had this really awesome talk about Bigfoot and the difference between the sort of more grounded, it's a biological creature, versus the more paranormal, it comes from a portal, it comes from other dimensions, it's an alien pet. The more sort of outlandish or supernatural explanations for Bigfoot. And so it was an interesting discussion. And Josh has really interesting perspectives on this, just being a religious man and more of a skeptic as far as the paranormal goes. And so we got into a really good discussion. It went very well, and we could have just talked for hours more, but I think we ended on a good note. So check that out if you haven't yet. Much longer episode than this one. This is just my own little personal experience, and I'll keep sharing these if you guys like them. So drop a comment down below if you do want to hear more of my personal stories. I have a few more, not tons, but I do have some stuff that I can talk about that happened to me over the years that I can't really explain. So I'll be back with some of those if you guys like them. If not, next week, I got some people in mind, so we'll see. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do yet because, again, my schedule is a little topsy-turvy right now. But again, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.